While we're getting seated for the next panel, I want to pick a nit, and that is for those of you in wind industry, I think you'll appreciate that there are lots of types of wind machines. A windmill grinds grain, a wind pump pumps water, and a wind turbine makes electricity. So next time you're talking about electricity, talk about wind turbines. We're going to have a panel now on preparing the next generation of planetary managers. I hope we're not talking about Mars. We will soon find out. But I want to introduce Julie Ann Wrigley, who will introduce the panel. Julie?
Good morning to you all on this happy and hopeful, beautiful day. I say hopeful because I think what you'll take from this panel is that there truly is hope. Hope for the new generations, hope for our future. I think one of the things about getting engaged in sustainability work and climate change issues is we have to think hopefully. I'm pleased to share the stage with two giants of sustainability education and one budding giant of sustainability education. Unfortunately, at the last minute, Daniel Wildcat had to leave for a family emergency. So 30 minutes ago, we engaged one of our recent graduates from the master's. She now has her master's from the Executive Education Program in Sustainability, all the while working full-time for the Global Institute of Sustainability. Today, you're going to hear from this great panel, which includes Gary Dirks, the director of the nation's first, not only Global Institute of Sustainability, but campus-wide. We have 90,000 students, and all of those students are engaged in the work of sustainability. 3 years after we started the Global Institute of Sustainability, we started the nation's first School of Sustainability. We also have one of the nation's, Ariel, one of the nation's top 10 most innovative educators chosen by the Chronicle of Higher Education, Ariel Anbar. And now let me introduce our hope for the future, Emma Hopson, who is, again, not only a recent graduate of our master's program, but also a full-time employee at the Global Institute of Sustainability. Many of you have heard my founding abalone story, is what we call it. As a child, I saw the abalone disappear right in front of our house in Southern California. I watched the smog move in. None of these things existed when some of us were children. Some of you in the audience have never seen a world that doesn't have smog in some form in the LA basin, and now we get it from other parts of the world. The story led me to an anthropology degree at Stanford, then a law degree at the University of Denver, to becoming an early adopter of looking out after our environment, and then as environmentalists became a little radical for my ideas. I was a conservationist, working among others with the Santa Catalina Island Conservancy, and now I'm a very proud participant in the sustainability and climate change initiatives. I wanted to tell you more about what we're accomplishing in these last 14 years as the Global Institute of Sustainability. And if you don't mind, I'm going to use some notes because they're pretty impressive. ASU is not my alma mater, but when I went looking for the place who was willing to look outside the box, look outside the envelope, be innovative, looked past solutions that we thought we were formed by, and we're not. It was named the U.S. News and World Report 3 years in a row as the nation's most innovative university. We measure ourselves on who we include, not exclude. It's a place that delivers both access and excellence. The university-wide Global Institute of Sustainability has the world's largest sustainability faculty. Over 500 scientists and scholars devoted alone to the UN SDGs. And that hasn't been talked about much here, but it's critical. And whether we adopt it at local levels, state levels, we need to keep pushing ahead. And the movement is really important. Thank you. It's wonderful to be in a group of people who agree. We all come at it from a different approach, but we all agree. This isn't a political issue. This is about the importance of man on Earth. We, last year, did almost $100 million of sustainability research expenditures just at our university alone. We've shared our curriculum and insight with virtually all of the 350 sustainability programs that have arisen since we started. We're connecting sustainability faculty at research institutes around the world through a global consortium. Each of those members of the global consortium, which is growing daily, works then with their local partners, their NGOs, the agencies, to share and implement these sustainability solutions. Many of you probably had as one of their mentors, and he was certainly one of the most influential in my life, Ray Anderson. And I'm going to give you, he described himself as a radical industrialist. And he gave over 1,000 speeches in the years he became an important convert, but he touched so many of our lives. And he always quoted a poem that was written by one of his employees called Wednesday's Child. And if you'll bear with me a moment, 2 quick paragraphs. Knowing you has changed my thinking, for I never had an inkling that perhaps the things I do might someday, somehow threaten you. Begin I will to weigh the cost of what I squander, what is lost, if I ever forget that you will someday come to live here too. He understood that tomorrow and our children of the future were the most important thing we had, and we have to leave this earth in good shape for them. We no longer can pass off that responsibility. It's interesting, and I too come from a business background. He often said that he thought the great industrialists of the world would end up in prison. And he said, because theft is a crime, but the theft of our children's future should be punishable by the law. Let me talk about some of the things. These are my questions to the panelists today. How do we instill systems thinking so that our students and our young people see how things relate to and affect one another in a holistic way? How do we inspire futures thinking so our young people grasp how culture, tradition, and values influence decisions? How best do we teach strategic thinking to create the plan to achieve a particular vision? And perhaps the most important, in a world of experts, how do we embrace collaboration? Answer to many of these questions these last 2 days. so that we work effectively with others to achieve a goal. One of my projects now is we're working to put together a film about, in our case, we call it Tomorrow's Child. And we're looking at the journey of some of the sustainability pioneers. We're trying to collect these for this PBS documentary so that it tells the story through the eyes of a child. And again, now to our panel, Bill Brandt, one of the great industrialists, and educators and systems thinkers, who will moderate this panel.
Thank you, Julie. My name is Bill Brandt. I'm the Director of Strategic Integration at ASU LightWorks, and I'm also on the board at AREI, because I think what your AREI is doing and what you're doing here is just like so important to the future. When I think about the future, I worked for BP for 30 years, and I was privileged to work there when John Brown was at the helm, and he coined this phrase, beyond petroleum. So when I retired, I thought, well, maybe I should figure out what beyond petroleum really means. And I came to work at ASU, and I've been part of the Wrigley Institute, amongst other things, in working on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you on a journey of what does it mean to be going beyond education as we knew it when we went to school, or as maybe our children might know it. But we've got Emma here who will tell us a little bit about it. So I'm going to turn this right over to Ariel to take us through his presentation.
So I'm Ariel Anbar. I'm the director of the Center for Education Through Exploration at ASU. And I'm going to try to give you a sense of how we're addressing the questions that Julie asked through the activities of our center, which are aimed at transforming the way we teach at ASU, but not just the way we teach, but also what we teach. So I assume I advance it by pressing this triangle button. We're going to see if that's true. The green. Oh, the big triangle. There we go. That makes sense. So first of all, narrative is the word of the day. General Clark said that earlier. So I'm going to give you a quick narrative of who I am. I'm not an alternative energy person. I'm a geoscientist. I study this thing. In particular, my scholarship is about studying how we got here. I study the deep time history of the Earth, the history of life, history of environment on Earth, and their interrelationship. In particular, I study the rise of oxygen in Earth history, so I was really intrigued yesterday by the Oxygen Project. Along the way, I got interested in whether or not Earth is alone, whether or not there are other planets out there that are like the Earth. So I became an astrobiologist, and I started studying a lot around that question. And kind of naturally, plus having children along the way, you start thinking about the future. And so I became very interested in what is our future, and that brought me into what I'm doing now. So along with some other faculty at ASU, we got together and have formed an initiative we call ASU PlanetWorks, which is about trying to figure out how humanity is going to manage this relationship between itself and the Earth going forward in order to keep the planet working. And when you get a bunch of faculty at a university talking about the future of the planet and the future of the planet as a planet that's dominated by human activity, inevitably we come to education. And what are we teaching our children, and how are we educating people to be the wise stewards of Earth's future? And what you come to right away is that we need a planet of problem solvers. Not that everybody has to be a problem solver, but we need a heck of a lot more people out there than we have right now who are able to tackle the kind of challenges that right now, even right now in this room, we can still barely conceive of. Because the challenges we're tackling right now around alternative energy are just the beginning of the challenges that we're going to be facing as humanity becomes more and more of a force on the planet. That's what many of us believe. So from an education system standpoint, what's the answer? Is more knowledge the answer? If we look around at education reform efforts, you see that a lot of them are focused around they define better education in terms of kids knowing more stuff and knowing it better. And we see that especially in science education, which is close to my heart. So some famous quotes, or quotes from some famous people here. Carl Sagan: "We live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology." Albert Einstein: "The more the knowledge, the lesser the ego. The lesser the knowledge, the more the ego."
Very appropriate.
And Neil Tyson: "Science literacy is a vaccine against the charlatans of the world that would exploit your ignorance." Now, all of this is true. I'm not going to argue with any of this, but I'm going to assert to you that this isn't enough. And I think we heard this morning a number of things that tell us that this isn't enough. And if I had a longer talk, I would give you scholarship, I would show you data and figures that show that it's not enough, but it all gets distilled in this nice cartoon. an inconvenient truth versus a reassuring lie, if you give people the choice, they don't necessarily choose the inconvenient truth. In other words, just because the knowledge is there, and even you've imparted the knowledge, doesn't mean people are going to choose that path that knowledge should take you to. And there's lots of scholarship I could show you that demonstrates that this is true, and we really understand this now. And it's not just about climate, and it's not just left or right. Genetically modified foods, vaccines, gun control, you can pick all sorts of issues and find these kind of effects, and scholars have started to do that, have been finding these effects that people are not driven really by knowledge. They use knowledge, but especially when issues become culturally loaded and bound up in issues of identity, we tend to use knowledge to reinforce our preconceptions as opposed to puncture our preconceptions. So knowledge alone is not enough. What do we need then? Well, what we need, and I think most of us in this room probably intuitively know this, what we need is to teach students how to use knowledge to navigate the unknown. It's about how you use the knowledge that's important, not just the knowledge itself. And at ASU, we like this word exploration. I'm actually in the School of Earth and Space Exploration, and so one way to think about this is we're exploring the future. That's what we're all doing. We're on this journey, and we're going to encounter challenges that we don't understand, that we have to navigate, and we need to be able to use knowledge to navigate that. And when we see dysfunctions around climate change and other kinds of challenges, what we're seeing is an inability to explore effectively. What we need is to train students to be questioning, reasoning, innovating, persisting, not just masters of lots of factual knowledge. So, and by the way, this is not just about climate change and all that. This is very practical. If you think about the jobs of the future, the job market of the future, people who know a lot of stuff are not going to be competitive because knowledge is increasingly a commodity. Your artificial intelligence systems already are picking off those jobs, and that's just going to increase, right? So if you think about how you want to train your kids to be competitive in the world to come, the economy to come, you want to be teaching them how to be questioning and reasoning and all these things that computers don't do all that well yet. So how do we do this? So there's also scholarship around this that we could spend half an hour talking about easily, but I want to direct you to this paper. If you go look at one paper, this would be the one. Science, Curiosity, and Political Information Processing, but led by a group led by Dan Kahan at Yale. So this is a paper, and there's others like this, that are starting to show that science curiosity counteracts this sort of political bias in decision-making. People who are more curious will tend to choose that inconvenient truth, or at least explore it over the reassuring lie. And there's evidence to back this up. And so, and how does this work? Well, if you're curious, right, that means inherently you accept the fact that there are things you may not know, and you want to explore those things. And so curiosity leads to exploration. Exploration leads to discovery, that aha moment, oh, I figured something out, I didn't know this before. And that's kind of addictive, right? You want to know more, and so that leads to more curiosity, more exploration. So we're calling this the exploration learning loop. And we're actually using this as a model for designing the learning that we're trying to do. It's the core of our theory of learning design, where we say to ourselves, well, curiosity is this emotion that we can try to spark and inspire. Exploration is a skill set that we can teach in a structured way. If you're a scientist, what's exploration? Exploration is looking at data, formulating hypothesis, building a model, getting more data to test the hypothesis, right? That's a structured thing we do in science that bores the heck out of kids, but it's exploration. If you do it right, it doesn't bore the heck out of kids because they're learning something through doing. And then finally, discovery is a result that we can reward, right? So we can build learning experiences around this kind of model, and that's what we're starting to do. Now, how do we actually structure such things? Well, how do we scale it, right? We don't do it through the lecture, right? What I'm doing to you right now works for 5-10 minutes max, and then you're out of here. It doesn't matter how good a lecturer I am. Unfortunately, this is still the basic mode of learning that we've got in higher ed. It's changing, but not really, not fast enough. We know how to do this pretty effectively if we really get into it at small scale. So this is a shameless plug. My wife is here, and she runs a network of children's science activity rooms in our local school district that she created. And we know that you can engage kids in these learn-by-doing sort of activities, right, where their curiosity is inspired and they're put through a structured process where they actually learn how to think and reason, how to be creative. They get a discovery, and they get hooked, and they want to come back and do it again and again. How do you scale that? It's very hard to scale. We need to deal with this at the planet. So somehow or other, this is the solution, we think, right? But not what you're seeing here specifically. This is the face of online education right now. When I say this is a solution, I mean technology. This is the face of online education today, and this doesn't inspire most people's curiosity, right? This is a very structured thing. It's basically a virtualization of the lecture. You've got your PowerPoint slides, you've got your lecturer droning on. You can pause and get a cup of coffee. That's not that. It has very little innovation over the traditional lecture. So we can do much more than that, and that's what we're doing in our center, right? So we're doing things like developing these immersive virtual field trips that can take students of all ages to scientifically important locations around the world and put them then, use these kind of immersive experiences to hook them, and then you put them through a structured learning process that's still in that kind of environment that allows them to explore questions that were inspired by their initial encounter with that environment. So we're building a whole bunch of these things. We're building them with Kamehameha schools. We're working with indigenous communities as well, where sense of place is really powerful and important, and this particular kind of technology really resonates with that. So this is just sort of a starter to give you a quick sense of what we can do. This is just a taste of what's happening. We are in the black and white silent movie days. We're just beyond the black and white silent movie days of online education, of using computers in education. We're just one step past having put a movie camera in front of a theatrical production, filming it, and saying, "Oh, I've made a movie." That's kind of what we're doing online right now. And it's true, you have made a movie if that's what you've done, but you haven't taken advantage of the medium of motion pictures, right? If all you do is put a camera in front of a stage and film a theatrical play. If you zoom ahead 100 years to movies today, right? We have mastered the medium of motion pictures. We can take people on a journey to Mars in a movie like The Martian and do dramatic storytelling in a way that was never done before, in a way that is in many ways more compelling, and it certainly scales better than what we could do in the theater. So we need to do the same kind of thing in online education, and if we get this working, to show the last video, then I'll show you a vision of what we think online education can become. It's not something we actually have right now, but it's a concept video to sort of whet the appetite and to inspire us. But maybe we move to the panel and just show that video at the end.
So my name is Emma Hopson, and you can all hear me. And it's an honor to speak to you all today about my recent experience in the Executive Master's Program in Sustainability Leadership at Arizona State University. I was a graduate of ASU in the Honors College in 2015. I majored in marketing and sustainability. And after accepting a job at the ASU Wrigley Institute, I soon realized that this curiosity was never going to go away. And it was an itch that I needed to scratch. So with the support and encouragement from my mentors and peers, I decided to enroll. But it was also this helpful meme that I actually saw online. So the program is comprised of various individuals ranging in experiences. We had individuals from Starbucks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, to age 25, present, to 65. And it was a little nerve-wracking to want to enroll in a program where you might have been the youngest. But I saw this meme online that said, Donald Trump running for president is the reminder that you can apply for that job even if you don't think you have enough experience. So I said, you're 100% right, and I'm going to apply for that program even if I don't think I have enough experience. And here we are. So the program, it's the Executive Masters in Sustainability Leadership, and it's a 13-month program. The Institute also offers a 2-year program for the Masters in Sustainability Leadership. It's a completely online program with 3 in-person workshops. So there's 2 at the front and the end in Tempe, Arizona for us all to gather together so we can meet each other and then end the session together and present our capstone presentations. And we also spent the summer for 2 weeks in Amsterdam, where we were able to test our skills and engage with organizations there. And throughout each week of the program, for 13 months straight, we had 2-hour weekly sessions where we were able to engage with one another over a Skype or video call. And we were able to hear from leaders and thinkers in this field. So everyone from Kate Brandt at Google, Dave Stankus at Campbell's, to Randy Olson, who covers the art and science of storytelling for science. So this exposure to the range of expertise was incredibly invaluable. And throughout that, we had 4 main components throughout the program. The first is strategic sustainability. So this was the embracing, not only instruction, but embracing of the system thinking and thinking bigger. And as we talked earlier about with Sally and Maggie, about not only systems thinking, but then utilizing that to get to the core and to the heart. And getting to the heart of what was at the system thinking was not only taught, but embraced by the professors and the cohort. And our first lesson, our very first lesson, I will never forget it, was tell us your assumptions. What are your assumptions going into anything? And just being able to be in a program that told us to embrace our assumptions and how to find those in everything that we do was incredible. The second was this global context focus. And this helped us embrace our strategic thinking and apply it with this global mindset and develop and nurture this. And then we went to Amsterdam to really put this to the test. And we worked with organizations there to hear about their sustainability commitment, but then go back to them and present to them on our recommendations. And we went with Philips, KLN, Nemo Museum, and this taught us to ask why and dig a little deeper and to work with our peers that we have differing viewpoints, but having what we've been talking a lot about is this understanding of arguments and this reasonable disagreement, because when you disagree, you can really get to the core of what a solution could look like when you find those differences, because that's where creativity and imagination truly lie, are in those differences. And that's what this program and engaging with the cohort really taught us. The third component was communication. And the communication instructor, he calls himself the chief storytelling officer. And we went in with embracing the art of story. And not only understanding our story and how to tell it, but how to understand your audience's story and how to resonate. Because without story and without being able to resonate with your audience, you're just saying your facts. And you'll miss the presidential election and you'll have what we currently have. The fourth is leadership, and that was understanding how to lead, but also how you like to be led. And truly embracing this opportunity of standing on the shoulder of pioneers. You know, Julie lit the path for all of us with her transformational investment by starting the first School of Sustainability at ASU. And after that, there are 350 programs now for the schools of sustainability around the nation. And Julie lighting the path, and therefore lighting the path for all of these other programs, really helped me to embrace this notion of learning from those that have gone before me and passing this knowledge and information on to others. So we experienced this firsthand with the guest lectures that I mentioned previously, and I was able to utilize this in my capstone project and interview over 50 leaders in the field of sustainability over the phone or in written communication. And what I can tell you is that, because I know that I have a lot of individuals in this room that many look up to. And when I got that confirmation from Mark Tursick, or Hank Rogers, or Sanjin, or the list goes on and on, about the over 50 individuals that I was able to connect with, it was invaluable. And my hope is now to compile these and receive approval from those individuals and create this into a shareable book that other leaders could learn from. And in addition to strategic sustainability, global context, communication, and leadership, the experiences that I had were invaluable. I learned also, in addition to those 4 components, to do something like this. When the benefactor of your school comes up and says, can you be on this panel in front of all of your mentors and biggest leaders in the room? And I also learned the importance of investing in yourself and investing in others, because without the support from the Institute of Sustainability, I wouldn't have done that. And I know that everyone in this room is either an employee or you are the CEO of some major organizations. And what I can say is that do not underestimate the imprint that you have on them and investing in them in opportunities such as a 13-month program to continue to stay curious and embrace being a part of the change that we are working collectively towards. Thanks.
Thank you, Emma.
So I'd like to maybe step back and be slightly philosophical to connect a number of the things that you've already heard with a number of really great conversations that we've already had here. But where I would like to begin is just say a little bit about sustainability, because if you kind of look around in the world at what people are saying and writing about sustainability, you can come up with a myriad of different ideas about what it actually is. And so I'm going to take advantage of being up here and share my own personal view as a place to start. And in my view, sustainability asks 2 questions. One question is, how does the system of man and nature thrive together indefinitely into the future? The importance of that statement is it is a system. We are in it. We cannot thrive independent of nature. Nature is being irreversibly, in many instances, influenced by us. We're in this together now. And if we're either going to thrive together or we're not going to thrive together. We're not going to thrive at all. The second question is, how do sentient beings, how do human beings derive meaning from the system of man and nature? And again, I think this is important because people, and we've heard this throughout the morning, people are inspired by the way in which they derive meaning. And rarely does that mean getting a new pair of shoes, unless you don't have any. It also brings in the reality, and I was delighted that we had the opening that we had this morning, the reality that we are not going to deal with sustainability issues without the active involvement of faith groups and everything that they can bring to this conversation. Because human beings, in many instances, derive a great deal of meaning there. Now, why start there? Well, because if you think about sustainability in the way that I've just described it, it's implicitly this idea of systems. Most of education that we're familiar with, 500 years or more of tradition, has been reductionist. I'm a chemist. I'm sure there's people out here that are engineers. We know that there are anthropologists in the room because they've identified themselves. These are all reductionist way of looking at the world. And I'm not criticizing it. This is extremely important stuff, but it is a single lens on the world. I look at the world through the lens of a chemist. Sustainability is inherently systems and integration of systems. So when somebody says, well, what does sustainability cover? I say it covers the entirety of the human experience, past, present, future. Everything is in. It's the connectivity that is important. And this is the kind of thing then that we have to be pushing the next generation to engage in. We talk about transdisciplinarity, it's a great step. But we have to be thinking, at least for a part of our student body, about a post-disciplinary world. You don't even look at the world through the lens of a discipline. You look at the world through a lens of what kind of issues do we need to deal with? What kind of people do we need in order to engage in those kinds of things? And I'd just like to make two other points, and then we'll open it up for Ariel and the question and answer. I think it's really important to embrace a point that Emma made just a moment ago, and there's a philosopher at UC Santa Barbara that's writing about this, the idea of disagreement. And this philosopher has written two books, I think, and many papers that are important. One is Reasonable Disagreement, and the other is Disagreement and Fairness. And in the book Reasonable Disagreement, he makes the point that, in fact, reasonable people can disagree. They can look at exactly the same set of facts, but they can disagree on what these facts tell you. And in fact, in this book, he develops the theory of disagreement, and he makes two constraints on himself. One is to explain how reasonable people could disagree after much attempt to agree. And the other, and this is the more important one, and we've heard that throughout the morning, how he needs to be able to explain how it is that reasonable people can look at other reasonable people and conclude that their arguments are unreasonable. In other words, how is it that we reach the point that we can have the kind of conversations with people we disagree with and accept their arguments as perhaps being reasonable? I think this is an enormous opportunity. I'll just leave it there. Then the last point I want to make is about solutions. We have to become much more sophisticated in how we think about solutions. It is true that you can solve some mathematical equations. It is also true, and some of you may have seen this, that one way to deal with a young child hanging off a balcony is to have a very athletic young person climb the front of the building from one balcony to the next. And that is, in fact, a solution. But most of the really difficult problems we deal with actually don't have solutions. In part because we can't even agree on what the problem is. Now, in this case, we need the ability to articulate and re-articulate and re-articulate and recognize we need mechanisms to govern. And if you can articulate and re-articulate, and if you can govern, keeping people in the conversation, that's probably about the best you can do until more information is available or something more deeply changes. And I'll just leave it there. Back to you, Bill.
Great.
And so this is just to set this up. So our thinking is that the digital at-scale learning of the future is going to look something like the middle of this Venn diagram. Somewhere there's an intersection between the narrative grip of a movie, the immersive achievement, sort of addictiveness of a game, and the intellectual substance of a course. Right? And that's something that doesn't actually exist right now. And we call that intersection education through exploration. That's what we call the name of the center. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see a movie that is a conceptualization of what this might look like.
It must be something to do with the parachute surface area.
We've checked air resistance, gravity, and the weight of the jumper.
I think the problem is here.
Let's ping Raphael and Laura.
Hey. Hey guys, we're still stuck on the landing. Here's a replay.
The auto trigger didn't open at the right height. Was the sensor calibrated for Earth gravity or Mars? Oops.
The future of education is here. No lectures, no laboratories, no limits. Learning by doing in a virtual universe where you explore your interests and the frontiers of human knowledge. Natural science, engineering, math, social science, humanities, everything that matters in the real world matters in Planetworks. It's education through exploration of the biggest unknown of all, our future. Our journey begins on Mars. The mission? Build a thriving society by learning and applying what you learn. Learn by doing as you tackle projects individually or in teams. Gain the fundamental skills and knowledge needed to make a world work.
What if you tried this?
Yeah, let's try it.
Success on Mars unlocks Planetworks Earth, a digital platform for engaging Earth's complex challenges, ultimately setting the stage for Planetworks Studio. An immersive blended year where you will unlock your entrepreneurial spirit and design real-world planetary-scale solutions for our global society. Planetworks is full of learning experiences that are guided by an intelligent tutor, digital learning resources that adapt to individual students' needs. Imagine state-of-the-art visuals and designed learning environments that compel and intrigue the young minds of today. Imagine collaborative learning bridging countries and languages, leading to better student outcome at scale. Imagine Planetworks.
So that just goes to show you that human beings really are necessary, because we've had to make a little bit of this up as we've gone, right? So Ariel, thank you for narrating over the top of that. But it does give you the idea of what it means to be a lifelong learner, what it means to be at the forefront of trying to develop these ideas, of how Emma's gone through this and experienced it, and then the points that Gary's made to bring it all back together of how do we pull these things together. So what I'd like to do in the remaining 4 minutes is throw it open to questions from you. When you start thinking about, well, what does it mean to be a planetary manager? Let's get beyond the current days. So do we have any questions out there? Yeah, right down here in front, Hank.
Yeah, so it's fairly obvious, all the, evidence is fairly obvious to all of us in the room. But what happens when you meet up with a person or a group of people, let's say, I don't believe in science, or I don't believe in the evidence that you're presenting. I believe that my holy book, or whatever it is, has all the answers, and that's the only place I'm looking for answers, and this has all been predicted in the book of Revelations, or whatever. And it just seems like a dead-end conversation with the faith.
Curiosity.
You want to start? Or,
Oh, sorry, right, we're mic'd up. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough one, right? If you're encountering, I mean, personally, you look for the common ground, right? I think everybody has certain things that they're looking for their families, for their children, and you can sort of try to find some common ground there. But I think ultimately it goes back to this notion of curiosity, right? I think it goes back to what can you say to that person to sort of pique their curiosity to get them to start to dig into their preconceptions. And some people that's maybe impossible, but I think in my experience anyway, it's usually possible. And often when I have those kind of encounters, behind that initial kind of confrontation, there is a curiosity there. There's just a resistance to where they think that will lead, and they put up this front, right? But if you can find a way to sort of get beyond that, often you can have a really interesting conversation. Not in your normal science frame, but it's there.
Any other questions out there? Over here? Yeah.
Just a quick question about your student enrollments. When you're talking about your academic programs and scholarly work, I'm very impressed. Could you reflect on your student enrollments? Do you see them growing and expanding, and at what rates? Just out of curiosity, how many young people are getting really excited about the work you're doing?
Sustainability.
Yeah, well, I'll be happy to start that. The philosophy of our president, Michael Crow, is that access to education is probably among the most important indicators of future success of any household. If they have very low levels of education, frankly, they'll struggle. So our philosophy is we want to be able to admit any student who can meet our admission standards, and we have a B level average admission standard, and then we want to do everything in our power to ensure that they graduate. Under that philosophy, I think we'll continue to grow and grow rapidly, and as we have been. And this will include online education. We're already one of the largest online education institutions in the world, and that's going to continue. So I see, yes, much growth.
One comment, in the School of Sustainability, 100% of our students, when they graduate, have jobs, and almost 80% of those are in their first chosen field.
And just in terms of scale, so ASU's online programs, we have, I think, some 30,000 students enrolled in fully online degree programs. That's not just taking a course here, that's the degree programs like the master's program you went through. And that's slated to grow to something like 100,000. And that's why there's interest in this kind of innovation in online education. How can we raise the bar in what we're doing there?
So the red light is on. We're going to get, sort of experiment with things, but we don't want to experiment if we don't leave the stage. So I just want to say thank you to Julie and all of the panel members for a good presentation about the future of education.